You're listening to Beat Autoimmune and Thrive, the podcast all about reversing and preventing autoimmune conditions so you can live your most vibrant life as soon as possible. We talk about autoimmune root causes, actionable solutions, and inspirational healing stories. I'm Palmer Kippola, and I used to have MS. Today, I'm an author, a speaker, a functional medicine certified health coach, a pickleball player, and nature lover who's helped thousands of people reclaim their health and their best lives. Let's dive into this episode. Welcome. Today, I am so happy to have Dr. Rajka Galbraith with me. She is a double board certified physician in Family and Integrative Medicine and a certified functional medicine practitioner who has helped countless people reverse autoimmunity, regain energy, and age powerfully through her Executive Edge and 3D protocols, which we'll explore today. She also wrote the wonderful book, Energized, Feel Fantastic Forever. Now, Dr. Rajka and I actually go way back. We first met in 2017 at a health and wellness influencer conference in the ladies' room lounge. We struck up a conversation, had an instant connection, and we have been friends and supporters since. Now, what I love most about Rajka is that she brings not only a wealth of medical expertise, but also a deep personal experience, which includes overcoming not one, but two autoimmune disorders. And with that, so much hope for anyone facing chronic illness. I'm excited for you to hear her stories and her powerful tools that she's using to help people heal and thrive. Welcome, Dr. Rajka.
Wow, that was such a fantastic introduction. I'm super excited to share my knowledge and ensure that no one endures kind of the journey that both you and I have had.
Oh, and that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do, right? I know you're equally as excited as I am to get out of bed in the morning and help people to live into their futures, which can be so bright. But with that, I always like to start at the beginning and start with story. So if you would be kind enough, can you please share your personal autoimmune healing journeys with us, how you healed and what ultimately led you to root cause medicine?
Absolutely. So when I was a little girl, I had three dreams. I had a dream of becoming a doctor. I had a dream of having my own family and children one day. And I had a dream of curing just about everyone. And because of the symptoms I was having, I almost didn't actualize any of those dreams. And it started really kind of medical school residency where I grew more and more and more fatigued to the point of where I was checking my own labs like quarterly and they were always normal. And now I know they really weren't normal. We looked through them in a different lens. And it just led to diagnosis after diagnosis, from that crushing fatigue. And, I finally got that diagnosis of Hashimoto's and I felt a little better temporarily, but my 20s, 30s, and into my mid 40s, the debilitation was ongoing and it would vary and outwardly, it's like you suffer in silence because outwardly we look normal, but inside you feel awful and you get labeled as lazy by your fellow peers and colleagues. In medical school, you have to be on your top of your game and you're rounding at ridiculous hours and you're up all night for days on end. But really, it went from infertility from Hashimoto's to infertility to vision losing migraines to PMS to, there was a day in my mid 40s that I'll never forget where the fatigue was so debilitating and I ran my labs and it was the first time they weren't normal. And my liver enzymes had skyrocketed, to 5 to 10 times normal. I don't even know now. And a marker of autoimmunity, the ANA, was 1 to 5,120. And before I had entered into this next phase of illness, it always ran 1 to 40, meaning that should have been the doctor's tip-off that that's not right. Your body shouldn't be attacking it. In April of 2013, we took this celebratory trip. I always joke and say I'd stayed awake long enough to get married because I was, the big joke at the table was when would I fall asleep at dinner because of the fatigue. Got married and after lots of effort, conceived these two beautiful children. Here they are, 4 and 8, and we had lived abroad, and we're celebrating multiple things that we were supposed to be celebrating that I was feeling well. The family really didn't know how sick I was. Celebrating returning to our families and celebrating that I just found this field of functional medicine. I had been training in it for about a year prior, and I was going to start my first job in a clinic back in the United States. And my kids were at the side of the pool, and they're little and they're squealing, "Watch me, mama, watch me." And all I could think of was like, oh my God, I should have been excited. And I was scared. I was scared that maybe I would leave these children motherless, that I wouldn't see them walk down the aisle to graduate, to get married, that I wouldn't be there to hold their firstborns. And that was really that defining moment where I'm like, I have got to do something different. I can't keep going down this path of one disease after another. And I sought the help of a functional medicine colleague that was training me on the back end. And back then we got CDs in the mail and there was no online anything, right? And so he was training me, and with his help, I reversed the disease process. At the time, the gastroenterologist was labeling as autoimmune hepatitis. I resolved the abnormal liver enzymes in about 6 weeks, and I never got the diagnosis. And the significance here is that if you're not on steroids for the rest of your life, the mortality rate is 30 to 50%. So 50% within the first 3 to 5 years. And I've never, ever been on steroids and never got the official diagnosis. And I'm here to reverse the health and lives of others. And I put my own processes in the book you mentioned, Energized, Feel Fantastic Forever. And I'm really on a mission to prevent the suffering of millions so that we all live long well. So I have two kind of passions. One is prevent that suffering or reverse it if someone's unwell, but then ensure that when they're on this last day on this earth at 80, 90, or 100, that it's the most beautiful day they can envision, free of pain, able to ambulate, able to enjoy the company of others, able to remember things, and they quietly pass away in their sleep, not in long-term care, without any suffering.
Mm. What a beautiful story and mission. And I know one that we share personally. I mean, many of us women in midlife also have aging parents, and mine did not age at all gracefully. And it was so depleting. And I just saw them hovering along the baseline for so many years. It was not truly living. So that is more motivation to help people with a prevention path. Do not go down the path of hovering along the baseline. So I so appreciate that you help people, the women who want to get pregnant and be healthier than they've ever been, as well as the people who come to you with symptoms. So before we dive into your protocols and so forth, I'm just curious, is there anything when you look back on your own story and your own journey, is there anything that you wish had happened when you first received your diagnosis? And I'm wondering if, we always can look back with hindsight being 2020, but
Mhm.
how might things have been different if root causes had been explored earlier? And this is really the path of hope for people who aren't, on the couch suffering or, complete with brain fog and total fatigue and so forth. I know we'll get into this, but I'm just curious when you look back on your own journey.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head by saying, "What do I wish?" And and what about the root causes? And I really wish that that first endocrinologist I met who had an ounce of integrative knowledge, that he said, "Well, why? Why did your body attack your thyroid?" I mean, that really would have been crucial and instrumental because a lot of the things that followed were all hormonally related, and a lot of those other illnesses and symptoms were hormone imbalance. And then it was also the autoimmune hepatitis was tipped off by just changing birth control pills. So of course I
Mm.
was on it for the endometriosis. I didn't know better. And unfortunately, thankfully, I didn't have a stroke, because women who have vision losing migraine should not be on birth control, and no one advised me of that. And it just never, it's hard to be your own doctor. Number one, I get a lot of people coming in, they've piecemealed together. And I said, look, if you've been at this for 1 year, 2 years, and I applaud people, I wanted to have them take ownership, but have a guide. I wish I would have had that guide that would have said, here, this is it's going to take. Because, when it got to be that, hey, my liver's going to fail, I'm going to die and lose, my children aren't going to have a mom, you're going to do anything. But why does it have to get to that point? And the other thing for anyone, it should never get to that point, is what I want to share is that the most common thing we see, whether the person coming in at 50 or 55, if they come in feeling well, the most common exclamation is, boy, I didn't know I could feel this fantastic. Meaning they were not even feeling optimally well, but they had no idea. And I always say it's like that frog. If you put a frog in a pot of water and start to boil, it might not jump out or die. It may die because it doesn't sense the heat coming on. But if you threw it in a pot of boiling water, it might jump right out. It's like it's a gradual decline. And this is age 15. So it's not. So, and all the way up to 55. I had a woman who was like empty nester. I do everything right. I was a stay-at-home mom. I got free time. I got a great social life. I volunteer. So she had all the things lined up. I exercise. I meditate. A great church community, like everything lined up. And she felt infinitely better. So those are the things I want all your listeners to start thinking about. If they have symptoms, get in yesterday. If you don't have symptoms, get in today. Like that's
Yeah.
where we have to
Yeah.
be thinking.
Yeah. I love it. Well, our world is becoming ever more toxic. And
Mm.
so I'm going to segue into your perspective on the root causes of autoimmunity and aging, because I'm seeing just an increase in people, especially women, coming to me with autoimmune disorders,
Mhm.
mostly MS, but also rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune hepatitis. I mean, you name it, there may be 150 or more. But I'm
Mhm.
curious from your perspective, what you're seeing as maybe the top three drivers of both autoimmunity and accelerated aging. And then we can segue into your executive edge protocol and 3D. We'll get into that too. So
Yeah.
anywhere you want to start.
Yeah, so I'll list them off and maybe we can go one by one, but it's
Yeah.
really stress, and you hit the nail on the head, toxins, and then it's foods. So those stress, toxins, foods, and that's really going to age you. All three of those will age you very quickly, and we can dive into each one of those now. If you're
Please.
okay with,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would love to. I see these 3 too, and yes, so go right ahead.
And there are more, right? So I have eight triggers for inflammation we go through, but those tend to be the top three. So stress will age you quicker than anyone's business. And so let me explain first what I hear, what I see when I test, and what I've learned along the way. So the most common thing I get from my high performers who come in with, mild or moderate unwellness, kind of the midlife symptoms, the men and women gaining weight, I don't feel as well, my libido's down, I don't sleep as well, is, but doc, I don't feel stress. And that's what they say. And when I sense that pushback there, it's even all that more important that I look at a cortisol curve because it's always through the roof. It's elevated at every single point. And because I've been running genetics on all of my high performers for the last 12 to 13 years, there's a pattern. So there's a genetic predisposition to burnout that can be
Mhm.
identified by your genes. So if you have someone that can't actualize the symptoms of stress in the body and they have this genetic predisposition, it's my job to say, hey, you want to work until the last day on this earth? Well, it's not going to happen. They are the exact person who comes in that says, I was fine, but seemingly overnight, I became disabled from my fatigue. They hit
Mm.
rock bottom, and it is that quick. And when I was first out back in 2013 in that practice, I had an executive, and she was kind of in her late 60s. She ran her consulting business. She never felt it. She came in completely burned out. We reversed the burnout. We talked about healthy things. And she showed up 18 months later. And it wasn't until we got her to actualize, like she carries stress in her body way differently than most people. And she was able to relate that it was some GI symptoms she would have. She always get GI distress, but not everyone has anything. And then it was when we got that realization, then she was more sold and bought in on let's do the measures to ensure that we're out of fight or flight. And so let's talk about fight or flight. So
Mhm.
and I'm sure you see that nervous system dysregulation, it's huge. It's
Huge.
a component of every symptom and disease. And that's why in our Executive Edge program, we teach everyone how to tangibly measure through a breath work that helps regulate the heartbeat and to get out of fight or flight. And here's what I've noticed is if someone comes in and says, but doc, I've been meditating 30 years, if they're not tangibly measuring that they're out of fight or flight, they could possibly not be. And in fact, they're the ones you run the cortisol and it's either flatlined or it's inverted or it's low in the morning and high at night or it's high all throughout. You're like, well, it's not being affected. And I wanted to share a personal story because I know, like you, Palmer, I've done a lot of personal and professional development. I tell people what I learn in professional development helps me with my personal health and then therefore helps my patients. And so I've undergone many trainings in breath work and nervous system regulation, but I undertook the Silva method, which teaches you how to get into alpha state so you're more creative. So initially, I did it for creativity and productivity. I didn't do it for nervous system regulation. First day, I felt, wow, 40 years of Zen had just melted off of my life in one day, one 8-hour day. And I was recovering from the flu, and I actually quiz the person leading the workshop. I don't know if I can make a 10-hour workshop 4 days in a row. That's a 45-minute drive either way, meaning it's going to be at least a 12-hour day for me. And I said, can I do it, some of it virtual? And he said, no, there's no virtual option. You're either in or you're out. And surprisingly, despite being still a little under the weather from the flu, made it through. But then what I did was I took the meditative practices that they taught me, and for fun, I put my little heart mass sensor, so that's the biofeedback modality, on my ear, and I closed my eyes and I did their meditative practice. And lo and behold, I was only out of fight or flight 49% of the time.
Mm.
Despite that, I felt completely chill. So, and I hear people resist and resist, and they'll say, yeah, but I knit to meditate, or I read the Bible, or I'm in prayer. And I'm like, I love that. Put the sensor on and make sure, make sure that that activity actually gets you out of fight or flight. I don't know if you've seen that. I'd love to hear from you, Palmer, like if
I
you've
love
seen
that.
that.
I love that. I love heart math. Let me
Yeah.
just say 100% of the people that I see come in with nervous system dysregulation,
Mm-hmm.
and we really have to start there. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a lot of the modalities and healing opportunities don't even really work if we're not in the parasympathetic state.
Mm-hmm.
We don't heal unless our bodies are relaxed and when we sleep soundly. And so, stress reduction, not just management, but reducing stress and having a way to manage it, measure it. I've used the Muse neurofeedback device, but heart math is what I started with years ago. For me personally, it helped me overcome my fear of flying. I got
Mm-hmm.
really dysregulated myself, when we experienced turbulence, and it trained me to stay calm even during the most jarring situations. And every morning, I wake up and I use Heart Math, Inner Balance Coherence Plus to help me and to measure, am I coherent? Am I staying in that state? And even when I feel calm, sometimes, I'm only 50% calm. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really I can't say enough highly about it. They have really become the forefront of the science of our mental state and our heart.
Yeah.
And getting coherent is just absolutely positively, in my experience, personally and professionally, one of the best ways that we can move from that stressed out, always on fight flight into that calm parasympathetic, which is where healing happens.
Mhm, mhm. 100%, and I'll just add, just like exercise, though, say you do your heart math for 10 minutes or however long in the morning, hopefully coupled with, some sort of meditative practice, but if the rest of the day you don't do anything, it's kinda like if you were to exercise and then sit for 10 hours at your desk, so that's
Yes.
why, now I'm at a stand-up desk, and I guess I have a hard time. I don't like it's I think it's sometimes distracting to walk and talk, but I'm pretty inclined to soon get one of those little like jogger walker things for under your desk to be able to
Yeah.
walk in between clients, to be able to walk at the end of the hour and to add just that next level. So you have to constantly move, and that would be the other break. And I've had some of my somatic people say, look away at an object and just enjoy it. And right outside my window are these gorgeous trees, or if you're walking, fixate on an object, or maybe you do the box breathing. So it should
Mm.
be something that's done kind of continually. And while we're speaking of stress, I think for women particularly, kind of in that, say, 30 to 50 range when you have your kids or a career, so it doesn't have to just be kids, it's a self-imposed stress. And I'd love to share that with you, and I think you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, please do.
So society, long time, I mean, we're the matriarchs, right? A lot of societies, we run the households, we, you know, even make all the rules and we're highly thought of. And even, my parents were Eastern European and, the women carried a lot of clout. And yeah, there were some things that were strictly the men's role back in the day, but, we take on too much. And I've tried to indoctrinate, you don't have to be it all the time for everyone. All right. So you don't have to do it all for everyone all the time. And that's kind of a common misconception. I had someone come in very, very sick from hers was a toxic hepatitis. And I saw her go through this lovely journey. And she's just like, we've recovered her because I've also, I like looking at the genetics, like, why did this happen? And even with all the more reason, I'm sure it's the genetics contributed, but don't buy your supplements at Costco or Walgreens or CVS. And this was a Costco supplement. So we have no idea what was in there, but we do know her genetics were placed, so it didn't help. But at the end of the day, I interviewed her at the end of her last appointment, like outside of her appointment time. I said, "I'd love to share this with other women. What wasn't?" She's like, "Well, I'd go to work all day. I'd work. I'd get home. I felt like I'd have to work, but yet I had to make dinner. And then the house wasn't perfectly clean. And it was the expectation." So really, and, I'm also certified as a high performance coach only because I've identified as one and also to help these high performers, like, particularly the first woman I saw who burned out twice. And that's that change in mindset. You can't manage more than 3 projects at once if you're a business owner. You can't be rolling out more than 3 new things. But it's the same whether you're a business owner, an employee, a stay-at-home mom. It's like the to-do list is always going to be ongoing. And that's where I always say, pare it down to what is actually needs to be done. Have buffer days of when you can do any overflow items. Delegate. Okay, so you got little ones at home. When we lived abroad, we had a nanny. Our nanny taught our son how to peel and cut up a cucumber when he was 2. And I was like mortified that he was going to chop his finger off. But like, there's no reason why you can't delegate that stuff, that everyone plays a role. And our kids are so used to doing it for so long. And yeah, when they were growing up, they said they were the only ones with chores and they're the only ones that had whatever else. If we should have hired a maid if they wanted a maid. But now they're young, one's a young adult, one's an adult. And we all just come together at dinner and cook and everyone has their role. We've divided things in the household, who does what, that makes sense. And if someone doesn't feel well, they get off the hook. They go and recover, There's no like we're a team here at our home, but every family or every household do it with your employees. If you're an employer or whether maybe you're a project manager and lead people under you, is delegate. Don't take on that stuff. Don't micromanage. And, one of my favorite books is Buy Back Your Time for business owners, and you can apply it to personal life. And I looked at and I wrote out all the things that I don't really like doing that really shouldn't be mine to do, like I can do. I can do administrative tasks. I can reconcile my accounting books, but should I be doing that? Shouldn't my zone of genius be looking at a person's history and crafting protocols and continuing learning and educating? That's where I want to live.
I love that. I am so aligned with that. I call it the give to list and decide, write down all the things that stress you out and decide what you're going to do with each. Delegate, give to God, let it go. You have to take things off the list and not just manage it because that just sounds, I
Yeah.
don't know, I'm not into stress management. I like stress reduction. Um,
Yep.
but absolutely positively, and I want to go back and just reiterate the importance of what you said about doing things throughout the day. And sometimes these apps and devices can actually help train us to breathe properly. And I love how HeartMath actually gives you a breath tracker that you can set, like how long you want your breaths to be. And
Mhm.
so throughout the day to practice that, because you're absolutely right. 20 minutes in the morning does not wipe out the rest of the day in terms of stress. So thank you for that perfect There are two other categories that you mentioned, toxins and food. So let's dive into those.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% when I heard you say about toxins is in our ever increasing toxic world. So let's tie this into the genetics, and I can give your listeners just insight into a pattern that I've witnessed in almost 100% of my sickest patients, or the ones that develop symptoms or disease younger, like in their 20s, like myself included. And so when it comes to toxins, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. But I say test, don't guess. I had a young gal who was a highly trained fitness professional, and it was like pulling teeth to get her to say, look, all your symptoms are, they're suspecting endometriosis. This is toxic exposure, toxic exposure. It's not allowing you to clear the estrogen how you should. And I said, we have to measure, even if your life is totally clean, because that'll be stored. So the first thing is test. The second thing is with toxins, you want to do everything in your power to naturally detox. So we'll dive into the foods in a bit, but that's moving and hydrating and sweating. Those are basic things. Dry brushing. Those are simple, simple things. If you have a rebounder, then bounce on your rebounder to move that lymph around. So those are really basic things. And then beyond that, do an inventory. So there's so many free apps out there. Skin Deep, Yucca, Think Dirty. My younger clients like the Yucca app. And they all have ways to do an inventory on your cleaning products and personal care products. And I'll tell you what, if you come into a home and smell a clean home smell and it's a toxic product, that toxin gets into your bloodstream in under 36 or 30 seconds. It's 26 seconds to be exact. So then you're inhaling it. Other things to think about is, taking your shoes off at the door. You walk outside, you're going to get pesticides on your shoes. They aerosolize them. You inhale them through your nose. Filter your water, for goodness sakes. Here in our area, we did a toxin test in our whole family. This would have been when we first moved here. So 10 years ago, we were all high in MTBE. That's a gasoline byproduct. What happens is the gas tankers at the gas station leak into our ground, and then it contaminates our groundwater. So we're such snobs. We were going to periodically look at moving. We get glass bottled water. It's absolutely delicious and worth every penny. But there are filters, so many different filters you can get. And I would say, I would almost test when you do buy that filter. I had a woman that had residual symptoms and we couldn't figure out why. And then she said, but I spent all this money on this filter. And we tested her. She was chock full of MTBE too. And I'm like, it's your filter. So then I can identify where is this source coming from. But it's more than that. There's mold and heavy metals. But let's hit the low hanging fruit, eliminate and avoid, and then naturally detoxify. And then beyond that, when it comes to nutrigenetics, and so I have a story around that. The first year in functional medicine, I would get 80% of patients better right away, like 3 to 6 to 9 months, but 20%, you get them better, but they'd linger. And so I did the deep dive down that rabbit hole. And so that was over a decade ago. And what that term is nutrigenetics are bypassing defective genes with vitamins and minerals. And so everything that's made in the body, say that you want to make melatonin, it requires a precursor, an enzyme, and then it converts to melatonin. There's multiple steps. And that enzyme is what the gene is named for that does the conversion. And every chemical step requires vitamins and minerals. So you can have a gene mutation, if you have one, so we get 2 genes, one for mom, one for dad. One gene mutation, that enzyme may function 30 to 40% less well. You have 2 gene mutations, 60 to 70% less well. So you're kind of behind the 8 ball. Now, what epigenetics says is that you can bypass and you can turn off these genes with healthy diet lifestyle. And that's been proven. But my big concern is in this overly exceeding toxic world is we're going to override that ability at some point. It's just gotten more and more and more. And I used to be able to give really gentle binders to eliminate some of these environmental toxins. And now I've had to change up my protocols. And I had a really young gal come in before she graduated from college. I saw her. And a lot of hers was hormonal, and she was wrongly put on antidepressants. And we can celebrate for her, though. She just got off of them. It was a year journey. And she kept having these like almost Herxheimer detox reactions every time she would lower the dose by a minuscule amount. And so
Mm.
this is managed by her psychiatrist. I certainly can do it, but we co-managed her. So I would manage any side effects and she would manage how fast we would lower. Thankfully, we were totally in agreement. She was integrative too. So we did a beautiful job, but chock full of toxins. She should have never, ever have been put on that antidepressant. This is all hormonal based, all of her symptoms. So, and yeah, she's really, really in a good spot. And that's what I'll say. So, you ready to hear about the pathway that I've seen?
I am ready to hear about it.
All right, let's go. So, I always teach all my patients one of the things that ages you is something called oxidative stress. The simple way to think about this is if you cut open an apple, what happens? And when it's outside on the counter for too long after you cut it open, it browns, right? So the browning of the apple is destruction of the apple on exposure to air. Same thing can happen in our bodies. So our body produces free radicals every time we make energy. So a little bit is good because it helps us fight infection. But once you create them, we are routinely clearing them down a pathway, a detox pathway that involves a couple different enzymes. And the biggest one, it involves an enzyme, just for thoroughness, not to be geeky, called superoxide dismutase, and that's called SOD. If that's mutated, think of anywhere in the pathway like a highway. If you have a roadblock, you're going to get a backup. So that's mutated, you'll get a backup of free radicals. The misfortune is those free radicals, if they accumulate, can combine with a healthy substance in our body, and that combination, we call it that combination is what leads to destruction of the tissue of your
Mm.
cholesterol, and you need your bad cholesterol to be damaged to deposit on your arteries, of your protein, so your muscles, of your DNA, think cancer. And then SOD actually takes that free radical and makes it into hydrogen peroxide. So for all the listeners, if you turn gray prematurely, you have to think that you're not clearing that hydrogen peroxide. Because what does hydrogen peroxide give us? If you want to if you want to go from brown to blonde, you put in hydrogen peroxide. It strips the hair of color. It's going to do the same thing, and you're going to go gray. So strip it completely of color. And that's exactly what happened to me. In my 20s, I started getting gray. And I was fully gray before I was 40. Thank goodness you could be any color you want, right? After 40, you can choose to be naturally gray or you can color your hair. But it was the same issue for my mom. She had the same issue, and she was a hairdresser, so she was really in tune to what that color was. So then that hydrogen peroxide gets neutralized, and it gets neutralized by glutathione or catalase. And the pattern I observed is there are three main genes, and it's GSTM1 and GSTT1. Remember I said that most genes have two copies? GSTM1, GSTT1, you can have 0 copies, 1 copy, or 2 copies. So that one's just reported, do you have the copy or not? And I have deletions in both those genes.
Mm.
I have null. They don't
Not
exist
there.
in my body. So,
Mhm.
and then the third gene, the GSTP1, mine is partially mutated. And it has to do with glutathione in general, but down that pathway to neutralize that hydrogen peroxide, it's glutathione peroxidase. And I have another mutation there. But so those three that are grouped that I've noticed 0 copy, partial mutation. And if you put that in the literature, and what I thought at the time, I discovered this in myself, and then I observed it in almost 100%. And the people who come in really debilitated from their symptoms. I also have people run the genetics if they're high risk. Have them run it if they're high performing, because I want to know how to mitigate any future potential insult. And so I noticed this, but when I finally put this through the literature, this combination, and I feared this and I didn't want to know about it. Yes, absolute increased risk of cancers, particularly really unusual or bad cancers. And I'm like, well, thank goodness, I've been around now since that insult in 2013, 12 years. And, for me, it is taking a little bit of glutathione daily. And then with higher stressors, flying introduces more toxins. That's going to twice daily. So I'm really careful about mitigating that risk. And if you're really flat out, you can support everything along that pathway. So I have a way I do that. But you don't want to do that too long. You want to gently support it because you can't get rid of all the free radicals or you won't fight infections. So I know that was very long-winded, but I'd love to hear from you, Palmer. I love having the dialogue with my hosts.
Yeah, I love it. This is so important and so overlooked by so many people and practitioners because genetics are complicated. And this is not an area of expertise for me. So having somebody like you that people can go to and really take their raw genetic data like 23andMe, right? Or Ancestry.com. I know 23andMe not operational anymore, but for those of us who do have reports that we've saved, super important data that you have, but then to be able to have someone interpret the data, which is, really critical. I'm learning
Yeah.
so much, especially about detoxification. And, we all have a toxin bucket and we can carry so many things until we
Mm.
can't, until that toxin bucket overflows. And for me, that was, at age 19, I developed MS. That was the first time I was diagnosed. So my smaller toxin bucket, because of all these detoxification SNPs, caused it to overflow earlier. But now to have the tools like, someone like you and others that do the interpretation and can help guide people, it's such a complex arena. So I'm really grateful for this understanding.
Yeah, I say it's super complex, and in this one, I love AI. I'm the first one, but I always say take it with a grain of salt because it's never just about the genes. It's what are the symptoms, what are the labs that we can measure, and what are the genetics. And soon, I don't know how soon, but we'll be able to say is the gene actually expressing or is it mutated, and we'll be able to dial it in better. But for example, I have a young girl who came in very sick at the age of 8. That's young, right? And exposure to mold. And not everyone in the house got as sick as she did. So you can bet your bottom dollar that she has those detox, what we call SNPs or mutations. But another gene that's very popular on the internet is MTHFR. Well, she came to me with some basic labs, and I was like, her homocysteine is 3.8. And
Mm,
like, and homocysteine, let me explain to the listeners, really tells me how well you're able to turn on and off defective genes. They measure methylation and through the methionine pathway, it goes on to make SAM, and SAM is what turns off those genes. Well, you want that number tightly regulated, 6 to 8. So as it goes too high, increased risk of blood clotting, so heart attack, stroke in young women, recurrent miscarriages. So if you have the MTHFR mutation, but she was on so much supplementation because because her mom had learned enough to know that it helped another family member is the best way to say it, that she put her on it, and I'm like, You're over methylating her." And unfortunately, if that happens, then you can increase someone's risk for cancer.
mm,
And that would be a long-term effect. So this is short-term, so she won't ever have to see that. Short-term effect, if you give somebody too many methylated B vitamins, you can make them ragey, suicidal. I mean, you
mm,
don't ever want to go there. And so to make a blanket statement, oh, if you've got this mutation, buy this supplement, it will help you. It's a range. It's a range of methylated B vitamins that one person can take. I've studied with at least 5 or 6 different people. I'd use a combo approach, and I say, we're going to do this sensibly and also based on their history. What's the history? What's the labs? What are the mutations? So,
so important, so critical. I am so glad that you brought this to our attention. It is certainly a complicated arena, but you're making it easier for people to understand. And anybody can look up homocysteine on a standard lab panel and see, where they are. And so
yeah.
having the information is super empowering. Thank you for that. And let's chat about your 3D protocol because this is where you lead people through, how to become well. And you've got 3Ds. Let's please talk
Yeah.
about those.
So the first 3Ds are laying the foundation, and that's actually the first step in my Executive Edge program and protocol. And it's really there's 9 steps, but we target the ones that make people physically feel better. So diet plus nutrients. And I say one step will improve the second step, will improve the third step.
Mm.
And if it's done out of the auto order, you can either not achieve what you want or, regret, or you can make someone worse. And so it's always diet and nutrients. We always teach about the top 3 diet things we'll get into in a minute. And then it's if you optimize diet, you can optimize someone's microbiome in as short as 7 days. And that's been proven in the studies. And so that's all the bacteria in your large intestine. Now, that the caveat there is if you have a bacteria that triggers the immune system, you're not going to eradicate that with diet. So you do need the next step, which is digestion. And I use the digestion as the microbiome. So that's what I'm using it as, just so it's easy to remember, right? So then we're going to optimize the microbiome. We're going to test. We're going to look for all those potential pathogens that are pretending that their protein in that bug or bacteria looks like your joints or your skin and is causing you to have that autoimmune disease process. And then the first 2 steps will optimize. Detox is the third D. And then we measure, what are you chock full of? What do we need to avoid? How do we need to clear these toxins? But all along the way, there are an additional 6 steps. But we always tell people, let's focus on the things that we can work through.
Yeah.
And in any one appointment, clearly, if stress and sleep, we are addressing those. It's stress and sleep. And for the third S, I use sex as a placeholder for exercise. Too much, too little. I mean, it seems like no one's in balance. It's either too much or too little I'm seeing come through my doors. And then we look at, I say the M's, what's your meaning in life? So if you don't have a purpose in life, then what's the drive behind you wanting to get better? And they know that man's search for meaning. Viktor Frankl lived through a concentration camp because he had a strong purpose. We've seen that time and time again. And time management, the moms, the executives, the women, or even the men that are just overscheduled. Unfortunately, the world is doing it to our kids. I can't tell you how many kids I see that are overscheduled. And then it's meditation or mindfulness or those steps. But yeah, it's really the 3 Ds are the laying the foundation. The next step is leveraging genetics. And the third step is my live long well. And that's the longevity piece. And I always tell people we have a lot of bells and whistles as far as we do have peptide protocols we use for acutely ill, for recovery, and for anti-aging. But if I put someone on anti-aging peptides and they're not foundationally very well at all, they're not eating healthy, they're stressed, they're overusing alcohol, whatever it is, they're not going to work as well. So you and I have both seen people or heard of people, they got on those weight loss peptides, the GLP-1s, and they didn't lose weight. And so this is why they're not the foundation hasn't been laid. They're not going to work as well. And they're going to have probably more side effects too. So I always tell patients that as well.
This is so interesting, and I'm realizing one thing, and you've just laid out a beautiful system here, but we didn't finish the top 3 toxins, and one is food, but it ties in beautifully with the next step, which is diet. And since we don't have much time left, I want to leave this to you in terms of where you want to go with this. And maybe we finish by talking about food, and then maybe you come back the next time and we talk at more length about, how you leverage genetics and whatever else that we didn't get to today. So I'm going to think of this as part 1. How's that?
I love it. I'd be honored to come back for part 2. So let's just give you the top 3 in diet. Okay, so we have 9 things we ask our patients to track. And since the pandemic has happened, I think we're seeing people are really interested in functional medicine, but they don't understand it takes a little bit of work. And you don't know what you don't track. And we're trying to really work hard with patients to say, look, we don't want you tracking endlessly. That will be disruptive to your life, but track for a few days. And the top 3 things people could do better on, that's what we want to look at. Like, where's your benchmark? Let's set it, is protein. So you need every adult needs at least 100 grams of protein. If you're losing muscle or building muscle, that's going to be more. 100 grams, no one's going to argue. What does that look like? Palm-sized serving of meat. That's about 30 grams. 3 palm sizes, or if you're doing 2 meals, slightly more than a palm and a half, you're already there. When it comes to vegetarian protein, think in cups. A cup of tofu is about 30 grams. A cup of cottage cheese is 30 grams. Not, dairy, it can be plus minus. The second thing, as I say, is eat a balanced plate for balanced blood sugar. Eat the protein and fat first over the carbs. You can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak, meaning you can add in your carbs, but you need to match that and combine that with protein and fats. And the amount of fats, and maybe we can talk to you about this in part 2, is I look at the genetic variations on how we break down carbs and fats, and then we can guide people through this. And we do have a weight loss program that's Whole Foods that I teach people how to eat for their genetics when they reintroduce the foods. It's kind of a beautiful thing. And then
Mm.
the third thing that almost everyone can do better on is increasing diversity. And what does that look like? 8 to 10 servings of veggies with a couple fruits. Hopefully, if you're having problems with weight, then lower sugar fruits and veggies, as well as how many different plant-based foods can you eat in a week? You want to rotate through them. You don't want to be eating the same 10 foods. You don't want to eat the same things. And that really, for when it comes to autoimmune disease, I measure this in the stool all the time. I'm sure you see it, is the bacteria eat our resistant starches, releases fuel for the human. We call that fuel for the human short chain fatty acids. When that goes down, you're going to have trouble losing weight and you're going to have trouble regulating the immune system. So I oftentimes will give people oral short chain fatty acids until we can diversify their diet. So it's just a stepping stone. It's not a long-term fix.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I'm so much in favor of all of your points. And especially the protein, especially for women. I see, people are not even maybe getting 30 grams a day. And that's just not enough, especially if you are trying to heal from an autoimmune disorder and there's tissue damage. Our bodies are made up of protein. And, the osteopenia and osteoporosis are real. And part of that is we are breaking down, our structures are breaking down. And so protein can help rebuild. And that is just absolutely vital. And we have to feed and take care of our microbiome. And so when we have this balanced plate and we get the diversity of all these great veggies in particular, it really helps our microbes take care of us.
Mhm.
Because if
Ab-
they don't get enough fiber, as I write about, they will eat the mucus layer of our gut instead of eating what they live for and thrive on, which is fiber. And those are the colorful plants.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It seems like we're so aligned in many of these ways.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Rajka, this has been so powerful and so hopeful because there's so much that people can do. And sometimes people are just wondering, where in the world do they start? And I think what you've given us with the stress and the toxins and the foods is plenty for somebody to get started and to lay the foundation for health and long-term, wellness and happiness. So I want to leave the last point to you. Is there anything that you'd like to say that you haven't had an opportunity to say on this part 1 of our conversation? Anything at all?
I want everyone listening to know that I feel you're worth it. And, so many come in, and it's until you take that next step. And, what is it about? Like, we're so ready as a society to buy the next shiny object. But what I've seen since the pandemic, people want to invest in their health, but then don't. I'm like, what it will cost you now is a vastly different what it'll cost you later, including the disability that comes. And, I speak often on don't spend your wealth on your health. So I've seen it. You've seen it with your parents. We just went through it with my mom, what I wish we would have known or done. And it's devastating. And I don't want anyone. So I think you're worth it, but I can't make someone believe that. And really, it's like I've recovered so many people that have been disabled. I'd leave with this: is you don't know what health is until you lose it, and so many have said that. Um, and one gentleman in particular, at his wedding, he wore a tie clip that said, "I'm healthy." And I was so flattered and honored to be invited to that wedding. And I was the first person he honored. And I just like absolutely burst into tears because I don't want to be anyone's first person they honor because they were recovered from such a terrible state. But I'm just so grateful that he's young and he's thriving and he's gone on to have a
Yeah.
family. And yeah, you're worth
You
it.
have been from pain to purpose. And it's so beautiful, and I'm so grateful for you and what you're doing in this world. And you also have a valuable free gift for our listeners. So could you talk about this 4-week course that you're offering?
Yeah, so the course is Fatigue to Fabulous. So Palmer will drop the link. It's $297 value. So you get me with 4 modules. We walk you through that 3D protocol I talked about. And I include a high performance module. So that's the last one. Remember, it's all about time management and some of the performance tactics that keep you high performing without sacrificing your health.
Yeah. Rajka, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your story, and your heart with us today. I know people are walking away not only with practical tools, but hope, real hope that healing and vibrant health are possible. And to everyone listening, remember that you are not defined by your diagnosis. As Dr. Rajka has shown us, when you get to the root causes and lay the right foundations, your body has the incredible capacity to heal and thrive. And she is living proof of that, and I am too. And I'm so grateful for you, Dr. Rajka. Thank you for being here with me today.
It was an absolute honor. Thank you.
All right. Be well, my friend. Look forward to the next time.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and if you feel inspired, please leave a quick review so other people can find it too. Now, if you want to beat autoimmune and thrive, make sure you sign up for my free video training at freeautoimmunetraining.com. That's freeautoimmunetraining.com, and watch the first video right away. Take good care. Bye for now.